here I was, all prepared to go over my big board, talk about the NBA draft, to get us set for the NBA draft lottery. But oh boy, the internet's got some rumors and the internet's got some thoughts. So let's talk offseason, big contract players, and playoff failures. It's time for Locked On Magic.
You are Locked On Magic, your daily Orlando Magic podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And you are indeed Locked On Magic. Today is May 15th, 2023. My name is Philip Rossman. I'm the expert insight editor over at OrlandoMagicDaily.com. Of course, follow me on Twitter at PhilipRR_OMD. On today's episode of Locked On Magic, we had a couple people on my Orlando Magic Daily staff write about it. We've had a few internet people begin to think about it. I've seen fans discussing it. So it's time to talk about trades and off-season planning and why the Magic aren't quite ready to go all in. We'll get to all that coming up here in just a moment. First, I want to thank you again for making Locked On Magic part of your day every day, no matter when you listen to us, whether it's first thing in the morning, whether it's right when we upload, right when we premiere. We truly appreciate you making Locked On Magic part of your day every day. Remember, there's a great Locked On podcast covering every single team in the NBA. Just search for Locked On and the team you're looking for, the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day. Today's podcast is also brought to you by our friends at PrizePicks. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match of up to $100 with promo code LOCKEDON. That's PrizePicks.com, promo code LOCKEDON. I know this is something that I've said. I've told my staff this at Orlando Magic Daily. I will tell you this today, right now. The Orlando Magic should definitely be looking at teams that are struggling in the playoffs, that don't advance as far as they would like. The Magic are a team that has some nice young players, but ultimately to get maybe the next star or to make that big piece, it's going to take a trade. And, in all our offseason discussions at this juncture, I've avoided the topic of trades because, A, they're just really hard to predict. And I'm usually just not in the speculation business. I would say that, I've talked with people about, do the Magic get in the CJ McCollum market if the New Orleans Pelicans make him available? Do the Magic get involved in Bradley Beal if he becomes available? Are they a team that would try to target Damian Lillard and convince him that he would be this place, that this would be the place for him to win his championship? I think, as I always say when it comes to trade rumors and it comes to these kinds of discussions, it's less about constructing the trade and breaking down what a fake trade would look like, although if there is reporting, if it does seem like it's getting more serious, then maybe you do start breaking down, okay, what would it actually cost? How does this deal actually look? And we're just not at that stage. So at this point, what I think is important to note is that the Magic are capable of doing these things, capable of getting involved in these conversations, and asking whether this is the right time to do it. Right now, it should be more theoretical. Of course, it's theoretical until it isn't. And a pair of rumors, and we're going to break them down in a little bit more detail in our next segment, from two teams that disappointed in their postseasons, that do seem like they are set for change, has kind of wrapped its hands around the Magic at this point. Whether it's just national media trying to guess what the Magic are up to, and everyone's always guessing what the Magic are up to if they care about what the Magic are doing at all. But a lot of these discussions that I'm seeing are very clearly favored on the teams that have been eliminated. And let's just not dance around it. I had writers on Orlando Magic Daily write about this. I've seen a lot of fans talking about this. We're talking about Jordan Poole of the Golden State Warriors and Deandre Ayton of the Phoenix Suns. Both the Suns and the Warriors failed to make the Western Conference Finals. They had disappointing seasons. The Suns have fired their coach in Monty Williams, Magic alum. He will land on his feet. He's a very, very good coach, and I think a lot of the league acknowledges that that was probably not the best decision from the Suns. But these are two teams that are championship contenders and have these albatrosses hanging around their neck. Whether it was Ayton in the disappointing way that his series went, whether it was Poole, who just became a non-factor in the Warriors' loss to the Los Angeles Lakers in their series. A lot of these teams, a lot of these trade rumors that I'm seeing clearly benefit the Warriors and the Suns. They're not to the Magic's benefit. And it's just a general assumption that the Magic are so desperate to make the playoffs that they will throw everything at getting there. And if there's one thing we know about Jeff Weltman, if there's a criticism that a lot of us have about Jeff Weltman, it's that he's not going to make that all-in move. And there is nothing in Jeff Weltman's history, at least at this juncture, where there is very little pressure that would suggest the Magic would make either of these moves. I'll break them down and explain why I don't think neither Jordan Poole nor Deandre Ayton make sense for this Magic team coming up on our next segment. But what I want to point out here is exactly that point. Jeff Weltman is known for his patience, to his detriment at times. He is known for his patience. But in this case, flexibility is the key. I mentioned, why can't the Magic go get a Bradley Beal, a Damian Lillard, a CJ McCollum? Why can't they be involved when the next big free agent comes available? And there will be surprises. It is the NBA. And so right now at this stage in the Magic's rebuild, flexibility is more important. Being able to attack quickly when the right guy comes around. To add to this roster as they're continuing to grow, as they get ready to graduate from the level they're at now to the next level to the next level. Flexibility and nimbleness, financially at least, is the way to go. Our friend Keith Smith of SpotTrack projects the Magic will have $23 million in cap room. That's obviously not enough to go after a free agent, but it is enough to absorb a lot of salary in free agency. So the Magic can be very big players on the trade market. But the one thing they cannot do is box themselves in. If you are bringing in a player who's worth $30 million, whether it's in free agency, like with a player like Fred VanVleet, whether it's in a trade with a player like Deandre Ayton, Jordan Poole, or as I mentioned earlier, CJ McCollum, committing to a $30 million a year player means you are essentially committed to that player. You're committed to the team that you have and believe that is the team that can win you a championship. Obviously, the Magic aren't at that level yet. Obviously, the Magic are just hoping to make the playoffs. And expending key assets to get players who are not clearly an upgrade over what you are sending out, and you might have to send out multiple players. I've seen Warriors fans play around and dream of getting both Markelle Fultz and Wendell Carter in a Jordan Poole trade, which the answer to that is hell to the no from the Magic. That is, if that's your offer, the Magic are hanging up immediately. But the Magic need to be ready to make that move for the right guy. And so as we think about this offseason, and we talked about this with Howard Beck last week, and he seemed with the people that he's spoken to agree with what I think we all feel sitting here in Orlando, that the Magic are most likely going to kind of play this cool. They're going to look to add some players in free agency, sure. They're going to look to add some players in the draft, but they're not going to overspend on anything. Now, this period of extreme financial flexibility is coming to an end. The Magic have this summer, and really they have next summer to make a big move. Because Markelle Fultz is owed an extension, Jonathan Isaac is owed an extension, and Cole Anthony is owed an extension. Maybe the Magic don't pay all three of those guys. Maybe some guys do get moved beforehand. But the Magic are going to have kind of the pieces in place that they're going to use to advance this team further. Now, again, I've made this argument to a lot of people. You don't cap room isn't useful for big-time free agents anymore. Those stars align occasionally. I'm not saying they don't. That for a team like Orlando, you're not clearing cap space to go sign a guy. You're creating salary slots to make trades. A lot of people have told me that the Magic should waive Jonathan Isaac, and I'm just like, no. That $17 million salary is a clear, good trade chip, especially with the guarantees on Isaac's contract. This is about chess pieces on the board. And so when it comes to thinking about how the Magic get from low to mid-level playoff team to championship contending team in the next 2 to 3 years, a lot of that's going to be about the moves they make this summer and the flexibility they maintain. And that's why going after a big-name free agent, going after a high-priced player in a trade does not make sense. The Magic don't need to run it all back. They do need to add players to this team. They need to shore up their depth. I think that is the biggest priority this offseason, is shoring up the team's depth. But ultimately what this summer's about is setting their board, kind of setting their cap sheet up for the big move down the road. Set themselves up for a playoff run this year. Begin to understand who's actually going to fit in this team when the postseason is a realistic thing or is a thing that's going to happen every year. And then beginning to move those pieces around the board or exchanging pieces to make that work. That's what this season's about, and that's why flexibility is really, really important. But because everyone's talking about it, I will break down why Jordan Poole and Deandre Ayton are not the answers for the Orlando Magic. We'll do that coming up here in just a moment. But first, we got to say a quick word from our friends over at PrizePicks. Every day of the NBA playoffs and finals, one PrizePicks user will win a chance at becoming a millionaire. One entry placed after 8 a.m. Eastern Standard Time will be randomly selected each day. Whoever placed that entry will be given a 6-pick flex with the following payouts. 4 correct picks get you $16,000. 5 correct picks get you $80,000. And 6 correct picks get you that cool million. Full details will be found at prizepicks.com/million. You must opt in at that link to be eligible for the $1 million prize. Once you opt in, all you have to do is play the game like normal, and you could be the lucky winner. PrizePicks is the daily fantasy game done right. There's no complicated salary caps. There's no worrying about what other players in your pool are doing or how big that pool is or how many sharks are swimming in that pool as well. You're not just hoping to make your money back. You're actually winning big dollars. All you have to do is pick 2 to 6 players, and if they go on to score more or less than their PrizePicks projection, you can win up to 25 times your entry. There's no competing against other people. It's just you versus projections, and that means it's all about your skill and not about the randomness of the pool. PrizePicks offers projections on any sport that you watch. You can even mix and match sports between the NBA, MLB, NHL, PGA Championship this weekend, and so many more sports. WNBA is even offered. NASCAR's offered. Anything you could think of, PrizePicks will probably have a projection for you. Entries can be made in 60 seconds or less. It's really that easy. Safe and fast withdrawals. Currently operational in more than 30 states, including here in Florida, as well as Canada. Download the PrizePicks app or go to prizepicks.com to sign up and play daily fantasy sports today. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match of up to $100 with promo code LOCKEDON. If you deposit $100, PrizePicks will give you $100. If you deposit $50, PrizePicks will give you $50. Don't forget to enter promo code LOCKEDON at sign up for an instant deposit match of up to $100. So, anytime a team loses, surprisingly in the playoffs, the first thing they're going to do is going to ask, how do we make this better? Especially when they're teams with championship aspirations, when these teams fall short. Whether it's the Milwaukee Bucks, certainly they made the coaching change, the Phoenix Suns, the Golden State Warriors, the LA Clippers, the Timberwolves a little bit, the Grizzlies a little bit, the Hawks. Every time you fall short of a championship, we're doing it with the Magic. The Magic had a very successful season, but we are constantly thinking about how do we get better? How do we get to the top of that mountain? And when you are so close and your options are limited, you do have to think about what you're going to have to do, and sometimes that does mean taking a step back to try and take 2 steps forward. And so immediately after the Suns lost, after the Warriors lost, you could start to see the shark circle. With Phoenix, there's questions about Chris Paul and his long-term stability and his long-term ability to be the point guard for that Suns team at a big salary number and still a fairly productive player when he's healthy. He is a player that does have a market to him and could be able to get the Suns a clear player that can help them get better. You have Deandre Ayton, who's been clearly unhappy with his time in Phoenix, especially as he slowly kind of fell down the pecking order. He was a no-show, and as good as he was against the Clippers, and I thought he was really good against the Clippers, he was a no-show in the series to the Nuggets. His effort was called out by national pundits. It was a bad situation, and one of the reasons that Monty Williams may have been fired is his poor communication with the former number one pick in Ayton. In Golden State, the Warriors gave Jordan Poole a fresh new extension that kicks in next season, but already the leader of kind of the young phase of this Warriors franchise, of the next phase of the Warriors franchise, wasn't playing in the fourth quarters of games. Was kind of being left off the team, and very clearly something was off. Something was not working, and there might be a little bit of buyer's remorse. And so almost immediately, and you can find it anywhere, we wrote about it on Orlando Magic Daily, so I'm not going to pretend to be immune about it. We're talking about it here. You'll find these articles saying 4 teams that could use Jordan Poole, and inevitably the Magic's name comes up. Before Poole signed his extension in October, the Magic were already being linked to Poole as a free agent target. So there is at least some professional dot connecting. I'm not willing to say interest. I don't think that's accurate because it was just, again, professional dot connecting. I'm pretty sure we talked about it on this pod too, if you want to go back and listen to my thoughts then. But there is at least, the same way that there was with the Gary Trent Jr. rumors and the Fred VanVleet rumors, at least a kernel of truth. Everyone recognizes the Magic have a need for shooting. They have an opening at their starting shooting guard spot. It is a concern and something people think the Magic will address this offseason. And Jordan Poole would seem to fit that bill. He would give the Magic an instant shooter, some instant offense, a guy who can spread the floor and attack a little bit. There is something to it. I'll say there's more to Poole than there is to Ayton. And I do think there is something to Ayton too, so I'm going to get to him in a minute. There is something there from a need base and all that. But like I said before, the cost is prohibitively high. His starting salary next year is going to be $30 million. The Magic do not have a $30 million a year player yet. Their highest paid player is Jonathan Isaac at $17 million a year. And obviously that has a lot of cost, that has a lot to it beyond that as far as guarantees and restrictions based on his injury. It's not to say that Poole would come here and automatically demand to take a ton of shots, but if you're going to pay $30 million a year for a player, you better be sure he's going to be a major contributor. And look, Poole had a great season last year in helping the Warriors win the championship. He averaged 20 points per game this season in the regular season. So he is a capable scorer. He will put up points. But are the Magic willing to spend what it's going to take to get him? To get to that $30 million number, and we can do the same with Deandre Ayton when we get to him, that's going to cost you probably Jonathan Isaac at $17 million a year. And certainly that would help the Warriors cut some of their salary, their tax bill if they decide to cut him. That's going to cost you Wendell Carter and his $13 million a year. That could cost you a Gary Harris and his $13 million a year, his $14 million a year. To get, and again, Orlando can absorb some extra salary once the calendar flips over. They have $22 million in cap room. So the way the trade gets constructed, the Warriors are going to expect a starter level player back, as they should, but that doesn't mean the Magic have to match salaries. So the Magic maybe don't have to give up as much to get him, but it's, again, a huge expense. And all of a sudden you're now committed to 4 years of Jordan Poole. If it were 2 years, maybe it's a different story. Maybe even 3 years, but you're committed to 4 years of Jordan Poole at that number. So we broke down a little bit about Jordan Poole and why that doesn't make sense. So what about Deandre Ayton? why the hesitancy over Deandre Ayton then? To some extent, just like Poole, I think Ayton does fill a potential need for the Orlando Magic. I love Wendell Carter. I think Wendell Carter has been really good, has played really well, but I have my concerns about Wendell Carter as a playoff fixture, as a guy who's going to contribute at a high level in the postseason, because you look around the league and the guys that are successful outside of Nikola Jokic are rim protecting bigs, guys who can play above the basket, can be lob threats, and that just isn't Wendell Carter. Now, personally, I think Wendell Carter is so good defensively. He makes up for it with his positioning, but the playoffs are different. And the playoffs are a little different than the regular season, and there's no doubt about it. And the Magic should be thinking about, or beginning to think about, how their players are going to react in the postseason. And, sometimes you can jump ahead of that stuff, but for sure as well, you can think a little bit about it. You can certainly think a little bit about it as well when it comes to, before you get there. But once you get there, you'll know. The playoffs expose every single one of your weaknesses. And so, to that point then, DeAndre Ayton plays above the rim. When he is engaged defensively, he is a very good defender, a very capable switching defender. And he just didn't do it this year for whatever reason. And how much of a red flag is that? I think it's a pretty big one. On top of that, Ayton is making $102 million over the next three years, where Wendell Carter is getting paid $13 million and decreasing. And so the question is, does that thing that you think you're going to need for the playoffs, that if you think Ayton can provide it and he can do it better than Carter, again, my big thing is, unless it's a clear upgrade, which I don't think it is in this case, nor do I think it is necessarily in the Poole case, although I think Poole does give the Magic something that they certainly need, I don't think you go all in on that, if that makes sense. I don't think you push all your chips into the center of the table for all that. And that's ultimately what this is. That's ultimately what this is for the Orlando Magic, is pushing all your chips into the center of the table. And the Magic just aren't at a point where they are doing that yet. The Magic just aren't at that juncture in their franchise's development, in their roster development. Now, again, if it's a clear upgrade, if, like Kevin Durant or, one of those all-time players comes on the market and you're in position, and the Magic certainly, I think, have the pieces marshaled where they could get involved in some of these trades or be discussed peripherally, but you still kind of need proof of concept that this team is a playoff team, that this team is truly on the rise that we think it's on. To make a move like these, to go after Jordan Poole, to go after DeAndre Ayton, to commit that much to really unproven players on such big salaries that are worth it to the teams that originally signed them at the time they were signed, but perhaps some buyer's remorse now that they haven't quite delivered up to those standards. To put all that down now is to box you in. And that just gets back to the original point of this podcast. It is not about going after the big fish. Eventually the Magic will have to do it. Eventually the Magic are going to have to take a risk. But it is still about making calculated gambles and calculated risks and saying, this move will help us and we will chase after it. But there's still work to do, or there's still things to put together, or there's still something else this team needs to do to get to that level. And to do this move now precludes us from making that next move. Doing a deal for Jordan Poole or DeAndre Ayton at that salary level, at that length of time, that is a finishing move. I would argue, and again, disagree with me here, but I would argue that the all-in trade, the trade that puts you fully committed to your team, fully committed to the group that you have, that trade is all about finishing the project. The Magic are not finishing the project. They're not anywhere close to done with the project. They need to add some pieces to shore up depth. They need to confirm that what they have is real. And so for now, flexibility, the ability to do anything, the ability to be in these conversations and to say no is a good thing. And it's how the Magic are going to act this offseason. Keeping themselves flexible and open to whatever happens and whatever might pop up, because it's the NBA, anything can happen. Keeping themselves open to whatever might pop up, but likely standing pat or standing still on that front to keep the pieces assembled to wait for the right thing to jump at. In my opinion, neither Poole nor Ayton are the right thing to jump at, because they don't significantly improve this team, and they box the Magic in with that group, with that player, for a pretty long time. As Magic fans are constantly worried, that clock is already ticking. You got 8 years after you draft a player to build a championship team around them before they hit their first big free agency. Got 2 years down on Franz and 1 year down on Paolo. You ready to commit to a team and be with them for 4 years and then potentially not be able to get out? Maybe that makes sense. Maybe it makes sense just to get in the playoffs and know that you're going to come up short. But I don't think these are the right guys to invest in. I was going to talk NBA draft today, but I'm having some computer issues. You probably noticed a little bit of a pause or a little bit of a difference, or if you're watching on YouTube, you probably noticed an interstitial. That's my cover for something happened to my computer. So we will talk NBA draft tomorrow. The NBA draft lottery, obviously, on Tuesday. We'll do a fake lottery spin on that day, but we'll go through my NBA big board and where I think the Magic, who the Magic I think should target. And what their needs ultimately are, because that's what the draft comes down to as well. But I want to thank you all again for listening to today's episode of Locked On Magic. Of course, find me on Twitter at PhilipRR_MD. Subscribe to the podcast, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn, Himalaya, Google Play, Spotify, Odyssey, and all of my channel podcasts to your podcast-enabled listening device. For latest on the Orlando Magic, be sure to check out OrlandoMagicDaily.com. Of course, find us on Twitter there at OMagicDaily. Once again, we want to thank you again for making Locked On Magic part of your day every day. If you're one of our everyday listeners, we really appreciate you jumping on board every day to listen to Locked On Magic. Like I said, tomorrow we will talk all about the NBA draft, who the Magic should be targeting, players that I'm kind of out on, and what my big board looks like. We'll get to all that on tomorrow's episode of Locked On Magic. But until then, for Orlando Magic Daily and Locked On Magic, this has been Philip Rossman-Reich. We'll see you all again next time for another episode of Locked On Magic.